Hello and welcome to River and Creek Safety. Now, we're going to be talking about being safe around water that's outside, and that includes by the shores of lakes and big ponds, as well as flowing water in rivers and creeks. Now, we're starting off with this picture because we seem to get a lot of reports where I work, and those reports are concerned with kids getting too close to the water in springtime, and that can cause a lot of problems. And we'll talk about that during this presentation. But I want you to look at this slide, and you'll notice that the water is a real muddy brown color. And that's because this water has been picking up the soil that's on the bottom of the river and it's carrying it away. That's something that's called erosion, when something picks something up and carries it away. So that is going on, and because the water's moving so fast, it's picking up a lot of soil and it's turning the water this muddy brown color. So if you see that color in the water and the water's moving quickly, it's not a good place to be around. The reason I know this water is moving quickly is these little white waves. Whenever water hits something like this tree right here, the water makes what's called riffles. Those are those little white waves behind what it's hitting. So the water is hitting those branches and it's showing us that it's moving way, way too fast. And we should never go near water that looks like this. So sometimes the water gives us good signs that it's not safe to be around and we should stay away. Now, if you think about it, there are a lot of things that we like to do around rivers and creeks and lakes and ponds, and it doesn't have to be in the springtime, it can be any time of the year. So you probably are thinking of some things. Here's some things that I've thought of, and we'll look at these pictures. One of them is canoeing or kayaking. That's a great thing to do, just paddling around, enjoying the water and the day. Another thing is just exploring and playing by the water. That's a great thing to do as well. Sometimes I even like to go down and look for fish and frogs in the water and skipping stones, that sort of thing. Now, another thing, when it's really hot in the summertime, we like to go swimming in the water and even rafting. Some people even go tubing on the water. Lots of fun. Another thing is if you're lucky enough to be able to go on a big boat, on the big lakes or on a big pond, then that's a lot of fun as well. And the last one I've got is fishing. A lot of people like to go fishing, try and catch a big fish with your friends. That's a great thing to do too. So if you think about it, we do a lot of things on rivers, creeks, lakes, and ponds on the water. Now, I want you to look at this picture and I want you to think, are these people being safe? Look close. They've got smiles on their faces, but there's some other things in this picture that tell us they are trying to be safe. So why are they being safe? Let's have a look. The first thing that you might notice is they are wearing something. Now, the something that they're wearing, it's not called a life jacket. They are wearing what is called a PFD. So here's the gentleman, he's wearing a beautiful PFD, and the lady as well is wearing a PFD. So they are being very, very safe that way. PFDs are a little different than life jackets. Life jackets are big and heavy and they're very bulky. You can barely move in a life jacket. Life jackets are what are on big boats that go on the Great Lakes or on the oceans. And if the weather gets rough, the captain might come on the radio and say, okay, everyone, we got to put on our life jackets. So you'd put on this big, heavy life jacket. And life jackets are very heavy, so you could probably pick it up with one hand and one arm, but it's very heavy, so you can barely move in it too when you've got it all strapped on. But life jackets are meant for those big, big waves that are on those big waters like lakes and big oceans. But PFDs, the P, it stands for personal. That means it's for you. The F stands for flotation. That means it's going to help you float if you fall in the water. And the D stands for device. It's just a thing that's going to help you float if you fall in the water. So we shorten personal flotation devices. We shorten that up to PFDs just to make it more simple. And you can wear a PFD anytime you are on the water. Remember all those things that we talked about? All those pictures, all those activities that we do around water? You can wear a PFD doing all of those things. You can go fishing with a PFD on. You can go canoeing with a PFD on. Some of you have even gone swimming with a PFD on, and you can still move your arms, and they are great to keep us safe when we're doing things around the water. So I'm really glad these people are wearing their PFDs. Way to go. Another thing is they have a friend with them. They've got a buddy. So let's pretend that this gentleman right here, he is all alone. He's paddling away. He doesn't have his buddy with him, and he spots something on the shore. He's looking at it, and he doesn't see it, but there's a big branch overhanging the water, and it hits him in the head, knocks him into the water, and he might be in big, big trouble. Now, let's pretend he's got his friend with him. She is not much bigger than you guys. I want you to think, what is something you could do to help a big guy like this? What is something you could do that she can do to help him if he falls into the water? You know what? I bet you some of you are thinking she could reach out with her hand or her paddle, and he could grab onto the paddle, or he could grab her hand and she could pull him out. You know what? He's way too big. He could actually panic and pull her into the water. Panic is when we get so afraid, and if he's in the water, he might be really, really scared. So he might just grab onto her arm or onto the paddle and tug and pull her into the water too. So she shouldn't do anything like that. You know what she should do? She should just yell and scream as loud as she can, "Help! Help! My friend's in trouble! Help!" If an adult hears someone your age yelling and screaming for help, they will come running to help you. And if nobody comes, you know what she should do? She should paddle to shore and get out and go and find the nearest house and bang on the windows, bang on the doors, "Help, help, my friend's in trouble," and then she can get help for her friend. So that's what she needs to do, and that is what you would need to do if that ever happened. Okay, so another reason they're being safe, they're on nice, calm water. They're not on rough water. If you go on rough water in a canoe, you should be specially trained before you do that, and that way you'll be safe. So they're staying on nice, calm water, and they're not in any waves, so they're not going to be in any trouble. Good job, guys. And they're also sitting in the canoe. They're not horsing around trying to knock each other out or playing, so they're being safe that way too. Here is something very, very important. Let's read this together. They've told an adult where they are. Let's read it again. They've told an adult where they are. So they've told a big person, a grown-up, where they were going, what they were going to be doing. You know what? Grown-ups like me, we should even do that. We should tell other people if we're going to go somewhere to do something for a while so everyone knows where we are. And I want you to think, who's a grown up, an adult that you could tell? I betcha you're thinking you could tell your mom or your dad, and that they are the best adults for sure. But if your mom or dad isn't around, maybe your grandma or grandpa's looking after you, maybe your aunt or uncle is looking after you, maybe a babysitter's looking after you, maybe even your older brother or sister's looking after you. So you should always tell them where you're going to be going, what you're going to be doing. And that way, they will know where you are. Now, sometimes an adult might tell you, you know what, I don't think that's a very good idea because it's not safe. You should really listen to them because they might know something that's not safe that you don't. So it's always good to listen to the adults if they're telling you something isn't safe and you shouldn't do it. All right. Oh, somebody just popped up on the screen. This is Splash. Splash is going to be, he's going to pop up every once in a while to show us some things and point some things out to us. So, hi Splash, nice to see you. So, why are rivers and creeks and lakes and ponds so dangerous, especially in the springtime? We're going to talk about that over the next few slides, and we'll talk about how to stay safe around these places. In the springtime, we've got a lot of changes happening. The sun is out a lot more and it warms up, and that causes the ice to melt. And when that ice melts, it gets a lot weaker. It starts to break up into littler pieces. And because of that, the river and creek waters get really, really cold. And all of that ice and snow melting means that the water gets really deep as well. And sometimes because of that, we start to get floods. Here's a picture of a schoolyard. And this schoolyard was flooded a few years ago, and the kids couldn't use the playground for a couple of weeks after the water was gone because it was too wet, too slippery, and too dangerous to play on. So sometimes floods can happen close to us. And the banks of the rivers and creeks in the springtime, they get very, very slippery because of all this melting. Here is a picture, and I want to show you down here is where I really like to stand and go fishing in the summertime. Now, it's a great spot to fish, but I would never go there in the springtime because I want you to look at this snow and ice. It's all melting. And because of that melting, it's making the ground very, very muddy and very, very slippery. So if I was to stand here again, I might slide right down into that ice cold water and I would be in big trouble. So these spots are very, very dangerous and not safe to go around, especially in the springtime. We should stay away from them. And one of the other things that we'll talk about in the next slide is something that's called erosion. And that happens when the water takes away parts of the land and the soil underneath the riverbanks. Here we have a young person fishing, and last year this picture was taken during the summertime, and you can see they're having a great time. They're catching fish, but I want you to pretend that it's not during the summertime in this picture. It is actually this time of the year in the spring when things are really wet on the shoreline, they're very slippery, and we've had something called erosion happening. Erosion's when the wind, or in this case, the water, is hitting the shoreline and it's carrying away the soil that keeps the shore up. And if there's no shoreline, then there's nothing to keep us up. So this young person is standing right on the side of the shore, and the water is moving very, very fast. Remember, it's all that ice and snow that's been melting. And the water in the spring, it's carrying with it all sorts of branches and even chunks of ice. And all of that is hitting the shore and it's knocking soil into the water. And the water, remember that first picture we looked at? The water is turning brown as it carries all that soil away down with it. So this young person might be in big trouble, especially in the springtime, if they are standing where they are. Now, let's move this person back a little ways. We're going to move back about 3 or 4 meters. So as we move back, the person's standing in a new spot now. I want you to think, is this person safe? The answer is actually no. They might have what is called erosion happening way back under where they're standing. The surface of the land, it looks like it's all there. It's going to keep them up if they stand on it, but there might be a rock upstream that the water is hitting, or it could be a fallen log that the water is hitting, but it changes the path of the water. And instead of flowing straight down the stream, the water now goes underneath and chews away the soil on the shore, and it goes back even farther on the land and chews that water away. So if this young person steps on that spot, they might go right through and be carried off under the ground, and it would be very hard for them to escape. So the best place for us to be is nowhere near a river or a creek or a stream during the springtime. So here is a picture that was taken by an airplane, and you can see all these big, big chunks of ice. Those big chunks of ice are breaking away from the main body of the ice, and they're being carried down the river. And once again, they're going to be hitting the sides of the riverbank and eroding all the riverbank and making it that muddy brown color. So this is all going on mainly in the late winter and the spring. So we definitely have to stay away from areas like this. And over winter and in the springtime, the rivers, creeks, lakes, and ponds are not safe. So here's Splash. He's got a really worried look on his face. He's thinking that some of you might go near these places, but I don't think you have to worry, Splash. I think these kids are really thinking about being safe. Good job. So this is a spot called a dam. And if you look, the dam is really, really big and it stretches across the river and it's meant to hold water. And there's a huge pond of water behind the dam. In front of the dam where we're looking, it is just river water that's flowing through the dam because there might be a door open that lets the water run through. Now, here's Splash, and I want you to think, do you think it's safe for Splash to be playing here? It's actually not safe at all, Splash, and I'm going to tell you why. This dam, these blue doors, when they open up to let the water go through, that water is moving very, very fast. And it's kind of like at home with your parents' vacuum cleaner. If you put the nozzle of the vacuum cleaner on your hand, it feels like it's going to suck your whole hand in. And when these doors open up and they let that water go through, the water's moving so fast, it actually sucks things in from beside it. So if this door beside Splash was going to open up, it might suck Splash right into the water and he would be dragged under. Now, remember, Splash is a droplet of water, so it's not going to hurt him to show us this. But if it happened to one of us, we might even drown, and then we could never come back to play with our brothers or sisters or our friends. So we would never want that to happen. So let's watch what happens to Splash. He's gotten way too close and he is going to regret it. So here's Splash again, and he is on a whole bunch of ice. But I want you to look closely at this ice. It has all this dark color on top of it. Sometimes ice can show us that it's not safe to be on. These dark patches are melting ice. That means the ice is thinner in those spots, and if you step on it, you could go right through that ice. But sometimes ice can fool us. Just like water in a river or something, it might look shallow, but it might be really, really deep. So sometimes water fools us. Ice is the same way. Sometimes it looks like it's thick enough to walk on or skate on or play hockey on, but really it's not. So looking at this ice, do you think it looks safe? I sure don't. So we should never go on ice if we are alone or even with one of our friends. We should always only go on ice if we have an adult with us. And that adult even has to do some things. They have to make a little hole in the ice and they have to have a measuring stick with them. So when they make that hole, they put the measuring stick in and they see how thick that ice is. And then they can tell you if it's thick enough to skate on or to play hockey on. So Splash, he didn't think anything was wrong. He goes out on this ice. Watch what happens to Splash. He fell right through that hole in the ice, and even Splash could freeze. But if that happened to us, we might be in huge, huge trouble. So never go out on ice alone or even with a buddy unless that buddy is an adult and they've checked the ice to make sure it's safe. Oh, Splash, what are you doing now? There he is, right by a really dangerous spot. Some of us live in the country, and we have these things on our property sometimes called draining ditches. And these drainage ditches, they carry water through the property, and sometimes you can go fishing by them, but not in the late winter and springtime, because remember how slippery those banks are? So Splash, we really don't think this is a safe place to play. Watch what happens to Splash. He's on that slippery bank. He goes right in that ice cold water and he is carried away. So never go near spots like this alone or even in the springtime. It is so dangerous. So here's Splash again, and he's by the water, but he doesn't have to worry so much about this water because it is not springtime, it is summertime now. And the water levels in the summertime are usually a lot lower than they are in the early spring with all that snow melting and ice melting. So the levels in the summer are a lot lower. And here's Splash right by the water. And I want you to think, is Splash being safe here? Now you might notice he's pretty close to the water And that's an important thing. We shouldn't go too close to the water unless we know it's safe. But I want you to think of some of the things that we've talked about already and think, is Splash being safe here? Well, let's think about how he could be even safer. One of the ways we've already talked about is to have a buddy with him. If he had someone with him that could help him if he gets into trouble, that would be a big bonus. So here is a buddy for Splash. Now Splash can feel safe and he's got help if he needs it. And he could also stay away from those stream banks. He's pretty close, so if he just stayed away from those banks, he'd be a lot safer as well. And he could play in the shallow water, just the water he's sure that it's not deep. He could just play around that water. That would be a great thing to do. And he could wear a PFD. You probably thought of that. So, congratulations on remembering. And now Splash and his buddy both have PFDs on. So, if they fall in the water, they've got something that'll help to keep them up. So, good job, guys. And oh, here it is again. This is the important one. Let's read it together. Tell an adult where he is. So if we all tell an adult where we're going, what we're going to be doing, and Splash has to do that too, then he would be a lot safer, and so would we. Good job, everyone. Well, our show's almost over, but before we go, guess what? There's a little test for you. So, which of these places could you play at safely? How about this one? Here we've got a really muddy outlet from this pipe, and it looks pretty unsafe to me. So I'm thinking I sure wouldn't want to play around this, and I'll bet you were thinking the same thing. What about this picture? Now, this picture, we've got some really, really high banks alongside the river. And if anyone fell into this, they would have a really, really hard time climbing out. So I definitely wouldn't want to play around that spot. How about here? Now, in this picture, you might not be able to see it too clearly, but there is a lot of broken ice and it's all floating down the river. So I definitely wouldn't want to play here. That ice is melting, it's not safe to walk on, and that water is definitely freezing cold. What about this? Now, this spot, there are a few people, and this picture kind of fools you a little bit because they're actually a good ways from the riverbank. They're not too close to it. It's kind of a small hill there. So they're fishing in a good spot. They're not going to slip or slide in, and it's summertime. You can tell that by them wearing shorts, and they've got buddies with them. And one of the buddies is an adult. So they're doing almost everything really, really great. But there is one thing you might have spotted that they could be wearing. Yep, a PFD. So we're going to put PFDs on them. And there they go. They're a lot safer now. They can still fish. They can do everything they want to do, but they're a lot safer. And oh, there's Splash. Splash is really happy. He's so happy with these guys. He's giving them a thumbs up. And good job, guys. We're really happy that you're having a great time, but you're being safe doing it. And here we are at our last slide. So let's remember, when you're near rivers, creeks, lakes, and ponds, especially in the springtime, stay smart, stay away from all that dangerous water. Stay safe always. Let's read it. Tell an adult where you are going. And that way you'll stay safe for a long, long time and you'll be around to bug your brothers and sisters and your parents. Okay, everybody, stay safe and have a great day.